Okay, I might get started. Welcome to AIRS 2. Okay, first thing I want to do is acknowledge the traditional owners. So QT acknowledges the Turrbal and Yugara as the First Nations owners of the lands where QT now stands. We will pay respect to their elders, laws, customs and creation spirits. We recognise that these lands have always been places of teaching, research and learning. QT acknowledges the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within the QT community. Okay, so AIRS 2, this workshop is about, it's very much in some ways about quite traditional sort of library kind of information. And so I quite enjoy teaching it because it's sort of like course searching in a way, and it focuses very much on the AIRS modules 4, 5 and 6. So we're looking at comprehensively searching the literature, setting up search alerts and cited searches. So there's quite, that's sort of what we're having a look at. So really at the sort of foundations of library research in some ways. So you'll be able to hopefully search databases effectively using search techniques and also create search alerts and use cited reference searching. So it's quite practical in that way. There's about what's to have, what's available. A lot of this is around the literature review and sort of populating that. So this requires you to have an extensive search of the literature. Some of you will be working on systematic literature reviews, some of them will have them just for your thesis. So some searches you will need to do will be quite broad and others will be quite precise. So there's no one perfect search string. That's kind of, you need to remember that. I think that, and that's why we will get you to look at sort of different ways of searching, and there should be many ways to use it. And some look at the development of a field, some at a very narrow question. So we understand that. And so we're going to be able to create several different searches within different resources, and you will do different approaches for each one, knowing what's in them. So that's some of the things we'll be having a look at. So when you have a look at the search process, the first time, and this is very much when you think of module 1, you look at the research questions. So that was in AIRS 1. You were looking at key concepts, synonyms, maybe relevant subject headings. Remember the module 1 question. It's not necessarily your thesis topic, it's the first stage in finding the words you're going to put into Google Scholar or a database or something like that. You're going to be looking then for peer-reviewed articles. That's really core of most research. If some of you are in IT, you might also be looking a bit at conference papers, books and ebooks to some extent, and maybe reference texts. And there's a few other things that are around, which I think we've got a very good, strong collection here at QT. We've got about 800 databases. In terms of our resources, we're one of the big libraries in Australia. And you'll use different search tools to access them. You can go, there's the library catalogue, the journal databases, and internet search tools such as Google Scholar. Then there's different things. Today we're looking a little bit about search statements such as Boolean operators, phrase and proximity searching, truncation, wildcards. They do come useful. They're kind of backups for a lot of things as well. I pull those out and go, oh yes, that might help if you're trying to get something. It's very easy to find stuff, but really trying to get something really precise and useful and sort of cull all the stuff you don't need is important. And also looking at organising results. So you will have broad and narrow results, recording a search history. So you're not continuously reinventing the wheel, and Michael will be talking about this later in that, so that you know at some point how to, when you've kind of got past the literature searching part of your a sort of thesis, how you can move on, make sure you're keeping up to date with things, saving and exporting items. And that's been a big thing, I know, because I've been helping with a lot of systematic reviews and how to get them into Excel and things like that, and classifying and annotating material. So there's a few things in the search process that comes together, and this blog you're doing is very much designed to take you through all that. So what types of information you will need? Well, it depends what you're looking for. Most of you, yes, you're starting with your journal articles, and our databases contain all these sorts of things. Some of you will be looking sometimes for newspapers, news media, streaming videos, film, some cases, so we have a lot of that. There's a lot of financial data we contain. There are also things like patents and standards, legal information, industry reports. So I often think I'm a business librarian and Michael is a science librarian. So in business we tend to have a lot of industry reports, like so an overview of the coal industry and things like that, which can be quite useful in broader areas as well. There's also journals and magazines, so both academic journals and trade magazines, ebooks. So really tremendous amount of information out there. So all of these are in a sort of, and let me just show you, let's have a little look-see about where you can find some of this stuff. So I'm going to show you here some of the places that you can look for it, not to take the excitement out of what Michael's going to show you, but when you're on the library homepage, this here, databases and specialised search tools, that's where a lot of this information is sitting. And for your databases, this is a very useful link, but we're trying to sort of classify these various databases in different ways to make them discoverable by different groups. So for this way, we tried and put them into study areas. So where your school, if you like. So we try and put databases according to schools here. You could also search by name. So if you happen to know the name of a database, is that great? But they're usually fairly meaningless names. They're just the name of publishers given them. And there's also the format. So this is when you can see the kind of stuff that is available for you. So there's quite a lot. So you might find theses you can find in there, videos and documentaries. So you can look at, if you're looking for a particular type of information, you can look at it that way as well. So there's all sorts of ways to search around for them. Okay. So in the databases, they are structured. So databases are structured with a collection of records with fields that contain data. So that's quite useful to know. They sort of are describing, the records describe the information, like in this one on the right here is a journal article. So we don't actually have to see the journal article to know that it is that. It describes it. It adds, there's the title, the author, the source title of the journal title, if you like, the volume, issue, year, page numbers, but they also have some subject headings attached, which are very useful. In some databases, they're quite specific, particularly in the medical areas. If you're using Medline or PubMed, they're very specific and powerful subject headings, which are basically labels. So, or same as a hashtag sometimes on Instagram, they're trying to give you, they place labels on them. So once you've found the right subject headings for your interests, they can be quite specific and not just a random word that happens to appear in it. So that depends on the nature of the database you're using, and maybe an abstract. Some databases will contain the full text of the item and own it. Some will just index the article itself. The reason being that they want to be able to be comprehensive in a particular area, but do not own the article in order to be able to provide it to you. So we have to link to another database for that. So, that was a very quick look at some of the things you can find in databases. And when we start searching, a few things we think about as we design our search strategy, and then we also look at how we would, where we would put those searches into, we find the right database for us. And so that's, before we look at that, I'm just going to go back to into here, into the AIRS module itself. So if you've got AIRS library here, I'm just reminding you with the modules that we're looking at modules 4, 5 and 6. So this is very brief, this presentation, so the full story, all the details are in here. So it's worth going in here, especially when you're completing the log. You might find some quite useful additions as well, like discussion of the Boolean operators and databases. So there's quite a bit of information there that is worth looking at. And within the log itself, all right, so we're looking a bit with your homework. We were looking at finding a search on social networking sites, culture and young adults. So with that, we looked at synonyms, which are sort of words that mean the same as far as you're concerned. So for synonyms for social networking sites, you came up with things like social media, social networks, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. What about Web 2.0 that was used a few years ago? Culture, the synonyms would be behaviour. Remember the difference between British and American spelling. Australian spelling tends to be a lot like British spelling, but the majority of journals are written American, but not all. So that will make a difference. Values, beliefs, and also think of young adults, youth, teen, teenager, adolescent. You were looking in one of the questions in your log, you have to come up with synonyms for your particular terms. And remember to have synonyms in your terms that are useful, that are really going to improve your search. So when people put something like results or evaluation or something in one as one of their synonyms, I think that would actually not really help your search. Just about every journal article will contain that word, so you probably don't want to include that. It's got to be quite on target for what you're doing. So in that, you are looking at having to find all these different, demonstrate that you understand how to use all these particular search strategies within your database, and you need to demonstrate that. Now, one of the main ones is what they call the Boolean searching. If you're from maths, it's just like that. It comes from that area, and there's a few things that are built in. So and is very much used to narrow the field because it's got to contain both those terms. So if we have, for example, solar and energy, that whatever you're finding must contain both. It often is automatic in Google Scholar, but we still, when you write it up in your log, we still want you to include the and so that you know what you're doing. With or, that's a time to link all the synonyms. Or means either word will do. Facebook or social networking, both words are fine for me. So or expands your search. So you'll have all these ors, and that's what often finding the right words can be a problem. So if you're not getting many results, expand them all with an or. And not is a way of excluding results. If you're just getting too many things which are just not the right direction that you want to take, you can add not, but you've got to be careful because it can exclude the things you want. So those are the real popular Boolean operators that we use a lot. Things that I have also, I use, one of my favorites is phrase searching with the quotation marks. This is when you have more than one word. So you don't need to do this with one word, but if you want to keep things together, government policy, and you want that phrase to stay together, or gig economy or something like that, you put in the quotation marks to put it in there. And then you might want to use other things like proximity operators. Different databases may have different functionality to how to do this. So look on the help section of the database. So proximity means the words are close by. So you might want to have government within 10 words of policy, for example, or within 5 words or whatever. So if it's very nearby, it's 5 words. As a rule of thumb, within 15 words will be about a sentence, and a paragraph 50 words. So that can sort of make sure those words that you want are close to each other and being used in a similar context. So that's a useful tool as well. Truncation, wildcards, and nesting. Truncation is useful when you have a stem of a word and you want all the variations. So I just put in little asterisks usual. So behaviour, behaviours, behaving, any of those you've got the stem of that word. Wildcards are used for different spelling, and I'm to use lately. I've assumed that a lot of these databases, particularly Google Scholar is a strong one, would be able to understand the difference between American and Australian spelling or British spelling, but it doesn't always. So for example, they've put it in here for behaviour so that it can have behaviour or an AOU, both of which, one's the American spelling and the other's the Australian. There's also S's and Z's. We tend to use a S, the Americans use Z's. So there's a little bit, you might want to work with that. And then finally, one of the other ones is nesting. This is when you have all those synonyms. So remember in module 3 of your resource log, you come up with all these different synonyms for the key terms in your topic, in your research question. Well, if you want to link those together, use an OR, and you put them in brackets so that they stay clustered. So we've got this respiratory tract infection. We keep that in quotations because it's a phrase, or bronchiolitis. And we put those in brackets to combine it with management. So you could get management and bronchiolitis, and you could also get results for respiratory tract infection and management. So it would expand it a lot more. And a lot of those nesting is built in. They're often each line have an advanced database search would be one of those. So let's have a little look at our search that we've been doing before, the homework you have been or may not have been doing earlier, and let's have a look at that. So let's bring up an empty worksheet here. So in the earlier little thing here, question, you were being asked for social networking sites. So we were having the theme was social networking sites, culture, and young adults. So those were my kind of 3 things. These were my key words. So the first thing I would do is that I think this might have to go in quotation marks. And I'd get rid of the S's because they'll be included or not included. So I would probably put young adult here. Another thing is I'd come up with all those synonyms. So we had the synonyms before. So we might have networking site or social media or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, because I'm happy with any of those terms. Now we had some other terms for culture. So culture or behaviour or beliefs or value, all those things. And then we had young adult and alternative terms for them. So or teen or adolescent. So we can have those coming in there. But then we might think, okay, there's also the opportunity, the spelling is a bit different. We've had behaviour. Let's put a wildcard in. So that one there is a different spelling. It could be teen or teenager. So let's put that search that way. So that's another thing that we could be doing with it. And the adolescent could be adolescence, all the other things. So we could just go to the stem of the word and use that truncation. So those ones could be truncated. So there's a few things that we've got there. Now, because these are all linked by or, I'm going to put them in brackets. And that would be, I can put that as a nesting. I'm nesting these, and I put them actually on each separate line of a database. So that one comes up. And then I want to link them all with and. So it's got to be about social networking and culture and young adult. So that's put in quite a few things. If I was looking to say how many things have I used here, well, let's have a look. I've nested these items in brackets. So that's one thing I've done. I've used phrase searching. Second thing I've done. I've used the OR function. Third thing I've done. I've used the AND function. So that's the fourth functionality I've used. I've used this wildcard. That's a fifth thing I've done. I have also used this stem here, the truncation symbol. So that's a sixth particular thing I could have. I could also have this proximity. So I could use this as a fantastic particular search strategy within one of my databases to demonstrate about 6 different types of functionality within that. I could also use, on the same database, I might do a different search altogether. I might do a search around proximity searching. So I want something social media and culture or something like that. So I might use social media, and then we had our proximity. Now, again, this one is the one that differs the most between different databases. So I might try N5, might be a popular way of doing it, but it does vary. And then I can put culture. So I want to find something within social media and 5 words of culture, or 15, or whatever I want to use. Now that could be my second search for that database, which again would be using a 7th particular search strategy. So you can have, one can have a lot, others can be quite simple. I'll get different results with this one. So those are the ways you can sort of show, you can bring in these different search strategies.